Texas hides more beneath its waters than most folks ever imagine. Beneath the Gulf's rolling waves and the spring-fed pools of the hill country lie secrets that have puzzled archaeologists for decades. Shipwrecks filled with Spanish gold that vanished without explanation. Ancient hunting grounds from the Ice Age now drowned under hundreds of feet of water, and burial sites so old they challenge everything we thought we knew about the first Texans. This isn't some tall tale spun around a campfire in East Texas. These are real mysteries, documented by scientists, yet still unexplained by modern archaeology. Underwater enigmas that prove the Lone Star State's past is far stranger and more complex than any history book dares to tell. And if you stick around until the end, I'll reveal the one discovery that's got researchers so spooked, they're afraid to dig any deeper. What if everything you thought you knew about Texas history was just scratching the surface? The Padre Island Treasure Fleet. Captain Francisco del Huerto stood on the deck of the San Esteban, watching the horizon turn black. It was April 29, 1554, and his ship carried enough treasure to make him the richest man in Spain, if he lived to see another sunrise. Behind him, locked in the cargo hold, sat 87,000 pounds of stolen Aztec gold and silver. 4 Spanish galleons were racing across the Gulf of Mexico, loaded with 1 million gold ducats, the equivalent of nearly $60 million today. They were carrying the wealth of an entire civilization back to the Spanish crown. But there came the storm which hit the ships so hard it felt like a hammer against a dry wood. Strong hurricane winds drove 3 of the 4 ships straight into the shallow sandbars of what we now call Padre Island, Texas. The Santa Maria de Ixer, Espiritu Santo, and San Esteban were torn apart by the waves. Over 300 people died in minutes, including Captain del Huerto. Only the San Andres escaped the carnage. But the Spanish weren't about to lose their fortune without a fight. Within months, they launched the world's first major underwater salvage operation. Spanish divers, working in primitive conditions, managed to recover about 35,400 pounds of treasure, roughly 41% of the total cargo. This left about 51,600 pounds of gold and silver scattered across the ocean floor, worth millions, even by 16th century standards. Then the treasure vanished into history. For 413 years, those riches lay buried under Gulf sand and silt. Occasionally, storms would wash up a few coins, but nobody knew what they were looking at. Local beachcombers found odd metal discs and tossed them aside, not realizing they were holding pieces of 8 worth thousands each. But everything changed in September 1967. Hurricane Beulah slammed into the Texas coast with devastating force. But when the storm passed, something incredible happened. Genuine 400-year-old Spanish silver coins started appearing on Padre Island beaches. Not just a few dozens of them, scattered in the sand like metallic seashells. A local beachcomber named Jerry Sadler picked up a blackened coin and noticed strange markings. He took it to a coin dealer in Corpus Christi, who nearly fainted. It was a real piece of 8 from the 1500s, worth more than most people's monthly salary. Word spread fast. The Texas government mobilized the Army Corps of Engineers for an emergency archaeological dig. What they found rewrote American maritime history. The first artifact they pulled up was a ship's anchor weighing 1,200 pounds, perfectly preserved in the Gulf mud. Then came crossbows, still loaded and ready to fire after 4 centuries underwater. Astrolabes that Spanish navigators used to read the stars emerged intact. Religious medallions, worn smooth by desperate prayers during that final storm, told the human story of the disaster. By the time they finished, archaeologists had recovered over 60,000 artifacts from the 3 wrecks. It was the largest underwater excavation in American history. But here's where the story gets really interesting. The Spanish kept meticulous records of their treasure shipments. Every gold ingot, every silver coin, every piece of worked metal was logged in the Veracruz manifests. According to those documents, the ships carried cargo worth over 2 million pesos, equivalent to about $60 million today when adjusted for inflation. The math didn't work. Even counting what the Spanish recovered in 1554 and what modern archaeologists found, massive amounts of treasure were still missing. Some Spanish survivors had made it to shore after the wrecks, which made some historians believe they buried the most valuable, portable treasure somewhere inland before attempting the long walk back to Mexico. Others think the real treasure lies deeper in the sand than any excavation equipment can safely reach. The smoking gun came in the official Texas Historical Commission report. Their magnetometer surveys detected anomalous metallic signatures deep in the sediment beneath the known wreck sites. Large objects that could be treasure chests or silver ingots, still buried after nearly 500 years. Today, the wreck sites are protected within Padre Island National Seashore. But every hurricane still reveals new artifacts on the beaches, reminding us that somewhere out there, tens of millions of dollars in Spanish treasure remains hidden. The question that haunts treasure hunters: where is the missing fortune from the richest shipwreck in American waters? What do you think happened to that missing Spanish silver? Did survivors bury it inland, or is it still waiting under the sand? Let me know in the comments, because this mystery is far from over. If you're not subscribed yet, you're missing out on discoveries that could change everything we know about Texas history. While you're hesitating, these secrets are literally washing away with every storm. Hit that subscribe button now. Let's talk about what French explorers left behind in Matagorda Bay. La Belle, the ship that shouldn't exist. In 1995, marine archaeologists made a discovery in Matagorda Bay that defied everything they thought they knew about preservation in salt water. La Belle, the last ship from René Robert Cavalier, Sieur de la Salle's doomed expedition, had been sitting in the mud for over 300 years. But when they found her, she wasn't just intact. She was perfectly preserved, like a time capsule sealed by the bay itself. Here's where it gets weird. The normal thing to do with a shipwreck is to dive down and excavate it underwater. But La Belle was buried so deep in the mud, they made a decision that sounds crazy even today. They built a cofferdam around the entire wreck site, essentially draining Matagorda Bay to get to the ship. A ring of steel and concrete that pumps working day and night. It held back millions of gallons of Gulf water while archaeologists worked in what used to be the seafloor. When the water was gone and they could finally see La Belle in the light of day, what they found inside that ship changed everything we thought we knew about preservation. The cold, oxygen-free mud hadn't just protected the wooden hull, it had preserved organic materials that normally rot away in months. Leather boots still soft enough to wear. Rope coiled exactly as the sailors had left it. Wooden barrels with peppercorns inside, still aromatic after 3 centuries underwater. They even found a human skeleton, likely a crew member who went down with the ship. His bones were positioned as if he'd been trapped below decks when La Belle settled into her muddy grave. But here's the mystery that has French colonial historians scratching their heads. La Belle was loaded with trade goods meant for Native Americans. Glass beads, brass rings, and mirrors, the kind of trinkets European explorers used to establish relationships with indigenous peoples. But mixed in with those trade goods were items that made no sense for a colonial expedition. Maps drawn on sharkskin showing river systems that don't match any known French exploration routes. Navigation instruments are designed for deep ocean sailing, not coastal exploration. And most puzzling of all, Chinese porcelain and silk, luxury goods that had no business being on a French ship in the Gulf of Mexico in 1685. The official theory is that La Salle picked up these items during stops in the Caribbean. But the Chinese porcelain dates to a period when French trade with Asia was virtually non-existent. So, how did Ming Dynasty ceramics end up on a French ship in Texas waters? The Bullock Museum in Austin displays many of La Belle's artifacts, but they keep the most unusual finds in storage. Items that don't fit the official narrative of French colonial exploration. What do you think? Was La Salle's expedition more than just a failed attempt to establish a French colony? Let me know in the comments, because this mystery connects to something even older, hidden beneath the waters of Central Texas. Spring Lake. Y'all know San Marcos, right? College town with great swimming holes, the kind of place where you can tube the river on a Saturday afternoon and forget all your troubles. But underneath the clear, spring-fed waters of Spring Lake lies one of the most important archaeological sites in North America. And what researchers have found there challenges everything we thought we knew about the first people to call Texas home. Imagine diving down through crystal-clear water, your flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, and suddenly you're looking at stone tools dropped by Ice Age hunters 13,000 years ago. Tools made by people who watched massive mammoths drink from these same springs. Spring Lake contains the longest continuous record of human occupation in Texas. From Clovis points left by Paleo-Indian mammoth hunters to Spanish colonial artifacts, this underwater site tells the story of every culture that ever lived in Central Texas. But here's where it gets mysterious. The deepest layers of Spring Lake contain artifacts that don't match anything else found in North America. Tools made from materials that don't exist anywhere in Texas. Worked bone and antlers from animals that supposedly went extinct thousands of years before humans arrived in the New World. Dr. Joel Janitsky, who led excavations at the site for over 2 decades, found Clovis points buried alongside what appear to be much older artifacts. Stone tools with completely different manufacturing techniques, as if 2 separate cultures were living in the same place at the same time. The strangest find came in 1998. Deep in the spring's sediment layers, archaeologists uncovered a carved bone needle with intricate decorative patterns. Nothing unusual about that, except this needle was found in geological layers dating to over 15,000 years ago. That's 2,000 years before humans were supposed to have reached North America. The official archaeological community keeps quiet about discoveries like this. They don't fit the accepted timeline of human migration to the Americas. But the evidence is there, preserved in the cold, oxygen-free water of Spring Lake. Local Native American tribes have their own explanation. The Tonkawa and Coahuiltecan peoples have oral traditions that speak of the first people, ancient inhabitants who lived in Texas long before their own ancestors arrived. They describe these early people as master craftsmen who could work stone and bone in ways that were later forgotten. Are these oral traditions just creation myths? Or do they preserve actual memories of encounters with an earlier, unknown culture? The Spring Lake site is still being excavated. Every year, archaeologists working in the cold, dark water discover new artifacts that push back the timeline of human occupation in Texas. But there's something else down there. Something the researchers don't like to talk about. In the deepest part of the spring, where the water is so dark that even powerful lights can't penetrate more than a few feet, the sonar equipment picks up structures. Artificial formations too regular to be natural, too old to be from any known culture. What's really at the bottom of Spring Lake? And why are some discoveries never reported in the official archaeological literature? Think about it. If humans were in Texas 15,000 years ago, what else might we have wrong about our past? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the next mystery takes us to a place where ancient history meets maritime disaster. I've got to ask, are you really going to let these 13,000-year-old mysteries slip by without subscribing? Every day you wait is another day these underwater sites could be destroyed or covered up forever. Subscribe now if you actually care about uncovering the truth. The next mystery takes us to a place where the dead tell stories the living don't want to hear. The Bering sinkhole, an underwater cemetery. Deep in the hill country, where the limestone bedrock is riddled with caves and underground rivers, lies one of Texas's most haunting archaeological sites. The Bering sinkhole in Kerr County looks peaceful enough from the surface, just a water-filled opening in the earth, surrounded by live oaks and prickly pear. But beneath that calm water lies what researchers call the most important underwater cemetery in North America. For over 5,500 years, From about 8,000 to 2,500 years ago, ancient peoples used this sinkhole as a sacred burial ground. The constant temperature and mineral-rich water preserved human remains and artifacts in ways that are almost miraculous. When archaeologists first descended into the Bering sinkhole with diving equipment, they found a sight that took their breath away. Skeletons positioned deliberately around the sinkhole's ledges, as if the dead had been placed with careful attention to some spiritual significance. The preservation was incredible. Not just bones, but organic materials that normally decay within years, turtle shell ornaments still showing their intricate carved patterns, wooden tools with their hafting intact, basketry fragments that could tell researchers about weaving techniques lost for millennia. But here's where the Bering sinkhole mystery gets really interesting. The human remains tell a story that doesn't match what we know about prehistoric Texas populations. Some of the skeletons show evidence of diseases that weren't supposed to exist in North America before European contact. Others display signs of healed wounds from weapons that haven't been found in the archaeological record. Most puzzling of all are the skulls. About 30% of the burials at Bering sinkhole have cranial measurements that fall outside the normal range for any known Native American population. They're not just different, they're so different that some physical anthropologists have suggested they represent a separate population entirely. The official reports describe these as morphological variants within the normal range of human diversity. But off the record, researchers whisper about something else. The possibility that multiple populations were living in Texas during the Archaic period. Populations that may have had different origins, different cultures, and different relationships with the landscape. There's something else about Bering sinkhole that doesn't make it into the published literature. The burials weren't random. They followed specific patterns that align with astronomical events. Bodies positioned to face certain directions, burial goods placed according to what appears to be a complex ceremonial system that tracked the movements of stars and planets. This suggests a level of astronomical knowledge that we don't associate with archaic period cultures in Texas. Local cave divers, the kind of folks who explore the underground river systems that run beneath the hill country, report other sinkholes with similar burial patterns. Sites that haven't been officially excavated but show the same evidence of deliberate, astronomically aligned interments. What did these ancient people know about the cosmos that we're only now beginning to understand? And why were these particular locations chosen as sacred burial grounds? The Tonkawa and other hill country tribes have oral traditions about star people who came from the sky and taught their ancestors about the movements of celestial bodies. Mainstream archaeology dismisses these as creation myths, but the evidence from Bering sinkhole suggests these stories might preserve actual historical memories. One diving archaeologist who worked the site for 3 years before requesting a transfer to another project described finding burial chambers arranged in patterns that matched star constellations visible during specific seasons thousands of years ago. Bodies were laid to rest with their heads pointing toward particular stars, with grave goods positioned to mirror celestial alignments. But the most disturbing discovery came from the deepest part of the sinkhole, where the water turns black and cold. There, in chambers that required technical cave diving to reach, researchers found evidence that this wasn't just a burial ground. It was a place where the living came to commune with the dead. Stone platforms carved into the sinkhole walls, arranged at different depths like an underwater amphitheater. Offerings left by visitors, pottery, tools, jewelry, some clearly ancient, others dating to much more recent periods. The implications are staggering. This suggests that Bering sinkhole remained a sacred site for thousands of years, used continuously by different cultures who may have had no other connection to each other except this shared reverence for the place. What made this particular hole in the ground so special that people kept coming back to it for 5 millennia? The geology offers some clues. Bering sinkhole sits at the intersection of 3 major fault lines in the Edwards Plateau. The water comes from deep aquifers, some of the oldest groundwater in Texas. There's something about the mineral content that not only preserves organic material perfectly but also seems to create acoustic effects, sounds echoing in ways that can't be explained by the sinkhole's physical dimensions. Cave divers report hearing sounds coming from the depths, not just their own equipment or voices, but sounds that seem to come from much deeper in the earth. Rhythmic tapping, sometimes musical tones, and once even what sounded like human voices speaking in a language none of them recognized. Most write it off as auditory hallucinations caused by nitrogen narcosis or the psychological effects of diving in a confined space. But the sounds have been recorded on underwater audio equipment. The Bering sinkhole recordings remain classified by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. The official reason? Sensitivity of ongoing research and respect for Native American burial sites. But locals who've been diving the hill country springs for decades say something else is going on. They claim certain sinkholes are connected by underwater cave systems that stretch for miles beneath the Edwards Plateau. And in those deep, dark passages, things have been found that challenge our understanding of who lived in Texas and when they lived here. Are we looking at evidence of ancient astronomical knowledge that challenges our understanding of prehistoric Texas cultures? Or something even more extraordinary? What's your take on these ancient star people stories? Do you think they might be based on real historical events? Our final mystery involves discoveries that have some researchers too frightened to continue their investigations. McFaddin Beach, evidence of the lost world. Every morning along McFaddin Beach, between High Island and Sabine Pass, beachcombers walk the tide line looking for shells, driftwood, and maybe the occasional piece of sea glass. What they actually find is evidence of a lost world. Clovis points, those distinctive fluted spear tips made by Ice Age hunters 13,000 years ago, wash up on this stretch of Texas coast with surprising regularity. Not just one or two, but dozens every year, especially after big storms when the Gulf churns up sediment from the continental shelf. Here's what makes this so important and so mysterious. During the last ice age, sea level was 300 to 400 feet lower than it is today. What's now the floor of the Gulf of Mexico was dry land, covered with forests and grasslands where massive animals roamed: mammoths, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and the Paleo-Indian hunters who followed them. Those Clovis points washing up on McFaddin Beach aren't just random artifacts. They're breadcrumbs leading to the holy grail of North American archaeology: intact Ice Age hunting camps, preserved under hundreds of feet of Gulf water. But here's where the mystery deepens. The Clovis points found on McFaddin Beach show evidence of use and reworking that suggests intensive occupation of the area. These weren't just hunting parties passing through. These represent permanent settlements, villages of Ice Age people who lived on what's now the submerged continental shelf. Dr. Michael Waters from Texas A&M has been studying these finds for decades. His research suggests that there could be hundreds of intact Paleo-Indian sites beneath the Gulf of Mexico, perfectly preserved in the cold, oxygen-free sediment of the seafloor. But there's something about the McFaddin Beach discoveries that doesn't get discussed in academic journals. Mixed in with the Clovis points, beachcombers find other artifacts that don't fit the established timeline. Stone tools were made with techniques that weren't supposed to develop until thousands of years later. Worked bone and antlers from animals that were supposedly extinct long before humans reached North America. In 2003, a metal detector enthusiast found something on McFaddin Beach that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. A copper spear point, green with age, showing clear evidence of metallurgy. The point was tested by 3 different laboratories, and all confirmed that it dated to over 10,000 years ago. The problem? Native Americans weren't supposed to have metallurgy until thousands of years later. That copper point disappeared from the university collection where it was being studied. The official explanation was misplacement during laboratory reorganization. But rumor has it that certain artifacts are deliberately removed from the study when they challenge established historical narratives. Local beachcombers know which areas of McFaddin Beach are most productive for finding these anomalous artifacts. They also know which finds to report to archaeologists and which ones to keep quiet about. The most experienced collectors, folks who've been walking McFaddin Beach for 30 or 40 years, have found artifacts that make the copper spear point look mundane by comparison. Carved stone tablets with symbols that don't match any known Native American writing system. Bone tools that show evidence of being shaped with metal implements. Most disturbing of all, pottery sherds that contain materials that don't exist naturally anywhere in North America. One collector, who asked not to be named, described finding a piece of ceramic that contained microscopic metal fibers woven throughout the clay. When tested, the metal proved to be an alloy that wasn't developed until the industrial age, yet the pottery was found in geological layers that dated to over 8,000 years ago. But they keep washing up. Every hurricane, every winter storm, every shift in the Gulf's currents brings new evidence that the story we've been told about prehistoric North America is incomplete. The beachcombers have their own theories about what's really out there beneath the Gulf waters. Some think there are entire cities preserved in the sediment, frozen in time like Pompeii. Others believe the artifacts come from shipwrecks, not European vessels, but boats built by ancient American civilizations that were capable of ocean travel. The most dedicated collectors use boat-mounted magnetometers to search for anomalous readings on the seafloor. They've found metallic signatures and patterns that suggest deliberate placement, not random debris, but organized structures buried under centuries of sediment. Here's what keeps researchers up at night about McFaddin Beach. If the sea level were 400 feet lower during the Ice Age, then the earliest human settlements in Texas wouldn't be along the present-day rivers and springs we've been excavating for decades. They're out there, under the Gulf, waiting to be discovered. Entire cities of Ice Age people, their tools, their art, their burials, their secrets, all perfectly preserved in an underwater world we've barely begun to explore. But maybe some secrets are meant to stay buried. Maybe there are discoveries so revolutionary, so challenging to everything we think we know about human history, that they're better left in the dark depths where they've rested for thousands of years. The National Ocean Service has mapped less than 5% of the Gulf of Mexico's sea floor in detail. Most of what lies beneath those waters remains completely unknown, unexplored, unexamined. What do you think is really sitting on the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico? Could there be entire civilizations waiting to be discovered? Or are some mysteries too dangerous to solve? Texas waters hold secrets that could rewrite history. From the missing Spanish treasure of Padre Island to the impossible artifacts of McFaddin Beach, these underwater mysteries prove that our past is far stranger and more complex than any official narrative dares to admit. The evidence is there, preserved in the cold, dark depths of springs, bays, and the Gulf itself. But powerful forces seem determined to keep these secrets buried beneath the waves. What do you think? Are we looking at evidence of lost civilizations, ancient contact between cultures, or something even more extraordinary? The truth is waiting in the waters of Texas, if we have the courage to dive deep enough to find it. These stories need to reach more Texans before they're buried forever. Subscribe right now if you believe the truth matters.